I had barely lowered myself into the last empty chair when Caroline swept in from the kitchen, holding a silver tray high like it was the crown jewels. 7 thick steaks, seared and glistening, sat neatly lined up. The room buzzed with small talk until she announced almost sweetly, "These are for family only." One by one, she placed a plate in front of Richard, Brittany, Evan, the cousins. The smell of butter and garlic filled the air, my stomach tightening with each drop of the tongs. When the last steak found a plate and the tray was empty, I realized everyone had been served except me. I froze with my napkin still folded on my lap. My name is Maya Brooks, 29 years old, married to Evan for 7 years. And right then, I was the only person at that long oak table without a meal. Caroline turned, already lifting the lid on a bakery box she had brought from the city. And for dessert, she added with a sparkle in her voice, a French tart, just for family. Laughter rippled around the table as if nothing strange had happened. My throat burned hotter than the steak I didn't get. I looked straight at my husband, the man who had promised me a life of partnership and respect. "So, Evan," I asked, my voice steady enough to hush the chatter, "am I family or not?" The scrape of his knife against the plate was the only sound. He kept his head down, slicing into the steak he had just been handed, chewing slowly as if the question had never been asked. That silence weighed heavier than Caroline's smug smile. It was louder than any insult, sharper than any snide remark. I had walked into that dining room still trying to believe I belonged. By the time I put down my fork, I already knew this meal was going to end my marriage. The first time I met Evan's family, I told myself the strange chill in the air had nothing to do with me. We were engaged, then young and hopeful, still glowing from the excitement of planning a life together. Caroline opened the door in a silk blouse and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She leaned in to kiss Evan on the cheek, then let her gaze travel down to me, pausing just long enough to make me feel inspected. "This is Maya, Evan," said proudly, pulling me close. "She works in finance at Frontier Market." Caroline's smile tightened. "Oh, retail," she murmured, as if she had bitten into something sour. I laughed softly, trying to brush it off. "Accounting mostly. Cost control." Richard, my soon-to-be father-in-law, appeared behind her with a glass of scotch in hand. "So do you manage investments too? Or just receipts?" Evan chuckled, trying to smooth things over. "Dad, come on." But the damage was already done. That night at dinner, Brittany, Evan's older sister, leaned across the table and said, "Don't worry if you can't keep up with the wine. Our family's used to the good stuff." Her bracelets clinked as she poured herself another glass, not offering me any. I went home unsettled, but convinced it was nerves. Everyone's awkward the first time, I told myself. But the pattern only deepened. Birthdays, Christmas, 4th of July, every holiday turned into a new reminder that I was an outsider. Caroline would buy matching sweaters for the family and hand them out one by one. Mine never came. At Easter, she lined up gift baskets, pastel ribbons tied in bows. "Oops, must have miscounted," she'd say, with a smirk when I was left empty-handed. Evan used to defend me. He'd squeeze my hand under the table or joke that Caroline should double-check her math. But over the years, the jokes faded. His silence grew heavier. One summer, they planned a cabin trip. Caroline called it a family getaway, her voice dripping with exclusivity. We packed up the car, and I remember running inside the gas station bathroom before we hit the road. When I came out, the car was gone. My phone buzzed a minute later, a text from Evan. "Mom thought it should be just family this time. Don't take it personally." I sat on the curb in the July heat, sweat soaking through my t-shirt, watching trucks rumble past. That was the first time I felt something inside me harden. I wasn't just being excluded, I was being erased. After that, I began keeping track. Not just of the slights, but of the bills, the receipts, the transfers I covered, when Evan's paycheck didn't stretch far enough. I never said anything aloud, but each entry in my notebook felt like a defense I might one day need. Still, part of me clung to hope. Maybe if I kept showing up, kept smiling, kept helping with the dishes and setting the table, they would see me as more than an intruder. Maybe Evan would find his voice again. But that afternoon in the cabin parking lot lingered like a bruise. Every time Caroline brushed past me without acknowledgement, Every time Richard asked a cutting question about my job, every time Brittany rolled her eyes at my thrift store dress, I felt the bruise deepen. I told myself I could endure it for Evan. But a seed of doubt had already been planted if he wouldn't stand up for me. Now, what would happen the day I really needed him? That question haunted me all the way to the August lunch that changed everything. The cabin trip was supposed to be a fresh start. Caroline had called it a weekend for family, her voice syrupy with the promise of lakeside sunsets and board games by the fire. I told myself maybe this time would be different. Maybe the digs and sideways glances would stay behind in Riverton. I packed my duffel with snacks, for the road, folded towels, even sunscreen for everyone. I wanted so badly to belong. We stopped for gas halfway there. I ducked into the restroom, humming to myself as I washed my hands, rehearsing polite things to say when we arrived. When I stepped back into the parking lot, the car was gone. At first, I thought Evan had pulled around the corner, then my phone buzzed. Mom thinks this should just be for blood family. Don't be upset. I'll call you when we're back. I stared at the screen, the July sun beating down so hard I felt dizzy. Blood family. 2 words that landed heavier than any insult Caroline had ever thrown my way. I sat on the curb, cars that was whipping past, and felt something in me shift. I wasn't part of them. I never would be. That night, I ate takeout alone in our apartment, the air conditioner rattling like a tired old fan. When Evan finally came home 2 days later, smelling like wood smoke and beer, I didn't ask how the trip was. He kissed my cheek and said, "Don't make this a big deal, okay?" His tone was casual, almost pleading, but it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Not long after, I discovered his bigger secret. Evan had lost his job months earlier. He dressed each morning, packed a lunch, and went to the office, but the truth was, he'd been fired after a budget error that embarrassed the city council. He said he didn't want me to worry, didn't want to disappoint his parents. In the meantime, rent, groceries, bills, all of it fell on me. I pulled double shifts, tightened our budget, and watched our savings drain like water through a cracked bucket. I didn't yell when he confessed. I didn't slam a door. Instead, I opened my laptop and began saving every transfer confirmation, every receipt I covered, every credit card statement with my name on it. Quietly, methodically, I built a record. If no one else in that family saw my worth, I would at least have proof of what I carried. By August, the weight of it all pressed down harder than the humid summer air. Caroline announced a family lunch, just a small gathering. I was instructed to arrive early to help. So at 6 a.m, I stood in her spotless kitchen, chopping vegetables, polishing silver, folding linen napkins, while the others slept in. By the time guests arrived, my back ached and my fingers smelled of garlic and bleach. I poured wine, fetched ice, carried trays of hors d'oeuvres until sweat beaded at my temples. Evan drifted in and out of the kitchen, laughing with his cousins, not once asking if I needed help. Caroline swept by me, like I was a servant whispering orders. Fix the place cards. Don't forget the vegetarian option for Aunt Carol. Finally, when everything was ready and I thought I might get to sit down, Caroline disappeared into the kitchen once more. Moments later, she returned beaming, carrying a silver tray piled high with steak sizzling and rich with butter. She announced it like a toast. These are for family only. One by one, she served Richard, then Brittany, then Evan, then each cousin down the line. The smell of charred meat filled the room, my stomach twisting tighter with every plate set down. When she reached the end of the table, the tray was empty. Not a single steak left for me. And then she turned her smile wider, now holding up a bakery box. And dessert, she sang a French tart only for family. The laughter that followed sliced deeper than any knife. The laughter clattered against the walls loud and sharp, while the tray in Caroline's hands gleamed like a weapon. My fork lay untouched on the linen, the napkin still folded neatly across my lap. The room seemed to tilt as I turned toward Evan. So I said, voice steady, though my chest burned, am I family or not? The chatter around us stuttered into silence. Every face at the table turned to him. My husband, the man who once swore he'd stand beside me, didn't lift his eyes. He cut into the steak Caroline had set before him, chewed, carefully swallowed, and said nothing. That silence was louder than Caroline's smug grin. I inhaled, held it, then let it out slowly. Interesting, I murmured. Because if I'm not family, then I suppose the last year of carrying this household was just charity work. Evan's fork froze midair. Richard frowned. Brittany's eyes narrowed, sensing a storm. I reached into my bag, sliding out a manila folder thick with papers. Since no one seems to know, let me clear this up. Evan hasn't had a job for almost a year. Fired from the Riverton budget office after an error made the council look incompetent. He leaves every morning with a packed lunch, pretends he's going to work. Meanwhile, every bill, rent, utilities, groceries, insurance came from me. These are the receipts, the transfers, the bank statements. I laid the folder on the table. The sound of paper against wood echoed like a gavel. Carolyn's painted smile slipped. That's a private matter, she snapped. Private. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. You made it public the moment you stood here and declared food was only for family. Well, if I'm not family, let's be accurate. Without me, Evan wouldn't have a roof over his head. Without me, you'd have been wiring him money every month. I carried him while you pretended everything was perfect. Evan finally lifted his head, pale and wide-eyed. Maya, please. Not here. Where else, Evan? My voice cracked raw from years of holding back. Where else but in front of the people you've let humiliate me, time after time while you stayed silent? Brittany scoffed, crossing her arms. You're being dramatic. It's just lunch. Dishes rattled as I pushed the folder toward her. Read it, line by line. Every dollar I covered while your brother played pretend. The room broke into whispers, chairs creaking, as relatives shifted uncomfortably. Then Joan, Evan's aunt with the kind eyes, leaned forward. Her voice cut through the tension. Enough. No decent host treats a guest like this, let alone a daughter-in-law. Maya's right. This isn't about steak. This is about respect. For a moment, I almost cried from the relief of someone finally saying it aloud. Carolyn's face reddened. You're twisting this. We've always welcomed you. Welcomed me. My laugh was sharp. You left me in a parking lot because I wasn't blood. You bought sweaters and baskets for everyone else and handed me nothing. You made me scrub your kitchen from sunrise and then denied me a plate. That's not welcome. That's erasure. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to form words. I slid another document from the folder, this one clipped neatly on top. These, I said, tapping the pages, are preliminary separation papers. I didn't come here planning to serve them today, but watching Evan eat in silence while his mother pretended I didn't exist made the choice for me. The air turned heavy, the kind that presses on your chest until you can barely breathe. Evan's face crumpled, but he still said nothing. That more than anything sealed it for me. I rose, smoothing my dress with trembling hands. Enjoy your family meal, I said softly. This is the last time you'll exclude me. Because after today, I'm gone. The scrape of my chair echoed as I pushed it back. Joan reached out, squeezing my arm in silent solidarity. Several cousins dropped their gazes, shame flickering in their eyes. Carolyn only tightened her jaw, refusing to meet mine. I gathered my bag, slipped the folder back inside, and walked toward the door. Behind me, the room hummed with broken whispers and the clink of silverware against porcelain, but no one called after me. When I stepped outside, the summer air hit me like a shock. For the first time in years, the silence felt like mine. The house was still ringing in my ears long after I left, but what stayed with me wasn't the laughter or the clink of glasses. It was Evan's silence. That night, he slept on the couch, the distance between us more than physical. He tried to explain in fragments excuses about his pride, about wanting to handle things himself, about not knowing how to confront his mother. Every word felt like a weak patch on a sinking ship. A week later, Caroline sent me an email. It was 3 sentences long, all in a font too formal to feel sincere. Sorry if there were misunderstandings at lunch. I only meant to keep tradition alive. Hope we can move forward cordially. Misunderstandings. As if I had dreamed the empty plate in front of me. The truth spread quickly through the family anyway. A couple of cousins called to check on me. One admitted they were too shocked to speak up, but wished they had. Another told me they were reconsidering coming to Brittany's engagement party because of how I had been treated. For once, the cracks in Carolyn's perfect image began to show. Meanwhile, I contacted my lawyer. We scheduled mediation. On the morning of September 9th, I walked into a conference room carrying a binder packed with every receipt, every transfer, every bank statement I had saved. Evan sat across from me, hair rumpled, eyes downcast. He didn't fight me on the facts. He couldn't. The numbers told the story better than I ever could. The mediator divided assets cleanly, and by the end of the month, the papers were signed. Just like that, 7 years became a file in a cabinet. I moved into a small apartment with a balcony that caught the afternoon sun. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. A week after settling in, my supervisor at Frontier Market called me into her office. She praised the way I had managed budgets under pressure and offered me a promotion, regional cost control coordinator. More responsibility, more pay, and a team to lead. I accepted with a shaking voice and tears in my eyes. One evening, while unpacking boxes, my phone lit up with Evan's name. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept. Maya, I miss you. I should have spoken up that day. I should have defended you. I was scared of losing everything at once, my job, my family, you. And I ended up losing you anyway. I listened in silence, the ache in his voice pulling at old wounds. Finally, I said, Evan, you had 7 years. And when it mattered most, you stayed quiet. I don't need an apology. I just need peace. He whispered my name, but I ended the call. For the first time, it didn't feel cruel. It felt necessary. Now my evenings are quiet in a way they never were before. I water the basil plant I keep on the balcony, watch the leaves glisten under the spray, and breathe in the scent of fresh green. The city hums below me, a steady rhythm that belongs to me alone. Silence used to mean exclusion, a weapon wielded against me at a crowded table. Now it's the sound of healing, the space where I can finally hear myself think. And that more than any steak or tart or hollow apology is what family should feel like. October slid in with a pale sky and a promise of colder nights. The decree arrived in a plain envelope with my mail thin as a grocery flyer, the kind of paper you could mistake for junk if you didn't know how much of your life had changed. I stood at the kitchen counter with the window cracked open and the smell of someone else's laundry drifting up from the courtyard. I read the pages twice. Then I set them down and washed the basil pot, snipping a few bright leaves for dinner. I hadn't cooked steak since the lunch that blew my marriage apart. The idea made my hands tremble, but trembling didn't mean I wasn't ready. I pulled a cast iron skillet from the oven drawer and set it on the burner. Butter hissed. Garlic bloomed. I pressed the steak down and watched the edges go from rouge to brown, the fat rendering into something that smelled like comfort. I wasn't trying to prove a point to anyone. I wanted to feed the person who kept me standing when everything else fell away. Halfway through, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was Joan. She said she was driving through my neighborhood and asked if I had a minute. I told her to come up, and 5 minutes later, she was at my door with a paper bag from a bakery and that patient look only people who have seen a lot of storms can wear without trying. I brought a tart, she said, lifting the bag as if it needed introduction. For family. I didn't realize I was crying until she reached for a stack of napkins. She didn't make a speech or ask for the whole story again. She just sat at my small kitchen table and let me talk while the steak rested on the cutting board and the skillet ticked as it cooled. When I ran out of words, she poured me a glass of seltzer and said, "It matters that you chose yourself, Maya. That's what people forget. Choosing yourself isn't leaving, it's arriving." We ate like it was a holiday nobody else knew about. I sliced the steak, scattered basil, added a squeeze of lemon, and slid a portion onto her plate. The first bite was a jolt of memory that didn't hurt as much as I feared. It tasted like a room where I belonged. After dinner, Joan told me she'd stepped back from Caroline's orbit. She didn't give me details, but I didn't need them. Distance is its own kind of sentence. She left the tart behind when she went, a quiet gift that turned into breakfast for the next 2 mornings. A week later, I ran into Brittany at the grocery store. She was in heels too high for linoleum, holding a basket like the handle might bite. At first, I tried to steer away, but she spotted me near the dairy case and moved in with a smile that was too bright. She said she'd heard about the promotion. She said she was happy for me. Then she paused and looked down at the floor, and for a second, the shine cracked. It got ugly, she murmured, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerators. Mom doesn't think she did anything wrong. She never does. She looked up like a person surfacing for air. I should have said something at lunch. I didn't hand her absolution. I didn't stab her with blame either. I told her the thing I wished someone had told me a long time ago. There's still time to be different. She nodded, then drifted away, and the aisle swallowed her shoes and the squeak of the basket handle. Work changed in ways I didn't expect. People asked for my opinion and waited to hear it. I made a spreadsheet, sing, and a budget, tell the truth, and no one rolled their eyes at the price of things I knew too well. The new team felt like a bridge that could carry weight. On Fridays, we took the long way back from lunch just to feel sun on our faces. I caught my reflection in a storefront and almost didn't recognize the woman walking toward me, shoulders back, jaw unclenched, eyes not searching a room for the next apology to collect. The first snow arrived in thin flurries that melted on contact. I stood on my balcony with a sweater pulled tight and watered the basil, which had grown into a small, bright forest. Below me, the city made its steady winter music buses sighing at stops, a dog barking, someone laughing in the alley. I breathed it in like proof. I used to think silence was a verdict handed down by other people. Now it feels like something I hold. Some evenings I cook just enough for one and eat at the table with the window open and the air tastes like cold metal and new chances. Once in a while, I slice a steak thin, scatter basil, and put a sliver of tart on a plate. I raise my glass to the woman who didn't wait for permission and to the life that doesn't ask me to shrink. And if the room is quiet, it's because I've finally made enough space to hear myself say out loud and without apology that I am family to the person who never left me. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.